Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I promise you won't regret listening to me talk, or at least I hope so. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion as I talk about mainly Native Americans and white ruling and native land and colonialization and the prosecution of people of color. Yeah. I hope that topic interests you because it interests me a lot and I have a good amount of stuff to say about it. So, yeah. I read The Wisdom of the Native Americans, and it was one of the most satisfying books I had ever read. The author compiles conversations with Native Americans who have endured white rule and colonialization. I like this book so much because it puts in plainly and simple words how it feels to be controlled as a minority by white ruling. And in this book specifically, it talks about Native Americans having little authority, control, and rule. Today, I want to ask questions like why is it that white people always seem to be in control? Why is it that they are the rule makers over everyone else in land that they are foreign to? And how we, people of color, persevere always. As lawmakers, lawyers, enforcement officials, these people define what is acceptable. They create the rules and tell how rule breakers will be punished and for how long. The history of white invasion starts a lot of times with religion. Getting getting into the historical context and history of white invasion of Native American land, I'll start with how hypocritical white rule has always been. First with religion. I learned how Christianity works. If you're Native American and pray to the wolves, you're a savage. If you're African and pray to your ancestors, you're primitive. But when white people pray to a guy who turns water into wine, well, that's just common sense. Trevor Noah talks about this in his book Born a Crime. We can examine a lot of the hypocrisy of white ruling in South Africa, a country mostly inhabited by ethnically African people, controlled for years by European white rule. The Immorality Act of 1927 presents exactly this insane idea, clearly in languages using native females and Europeans. Natives that were native to the land were not making their own laws about their own lives. The Immorality Act was a rule prohibiting illicit carnal intercourse between Europeans and natives, punished by imprisonment of up to 5 years. How could a small team of five gorillas possibly be in charge of 10,000 humans in Hawaii? They don't represent the majority and they're not native to the land or resources. It literally doesn't make sense. That's kind of what happened in South Africa. Language. I want to talk about how white people typically set up this rule with the precise language and jargon that they use to control others. It reminds me of law jargon, how it's literally created to be confusing, especially to those that aren't specifically educated in law. But these rules affect everyone, or mostly the people that are unaware of the exact meaning of the language used. I always wonder how the people typically facing criminal prosecution typically know the least amount of the laws and the litigation process. Typically, if you're not a lawyer or work in the court system, you know very little about these processes. Essential tips like the process of getting pulled over, what to bring to court, the jury duty process, and so forth that affects most citizens. We don't know about this process until we're in that exact situation, and we don't have the knowledge to know what to expect. The truth is that white people are truly the illegal aliens if we want to use that very strange terminology. But the law jargon and court system built to protect them stand in the way of white people facing similar prosecution compared to those of color. How smooth must be the language of the whites when they make right look wrong and wrong look right. It's hard to read the cooperation of Native Americans, the chances and the generosity they afforded white colonists at the time, only for their land to be taken away for profit. I need to add to, not without a fight. They cooperated with their rule in order to avoid violence and war. The cooperation served little effect on white colonists that were unwilling to compromise. We sent our little Indian boys and girls to school, and when they came back talking English, they came back swearing. There is no swear words in the Indian languages, and I haven't yet learned to swear. This shows the cooperation that Native Americans had when Europeans pillaged their land. They intended to share the land with the Europeans that they felt like belonged to all humans. Europeans wanted to sell and make profit off the land. Native Americans were told to join the meetings that white people had, to take part in their General Assembly, but when they showed up, They only heard talks of white people deciding what to do with the land that was not theirs. Coming into someone else's house and taking things that aren't yours. Where I'm from, that's called stealing, and you go to jail for that. I want to read this quick passage here. I have a book in my hand. That's so crazy. Our wise men are called fathers, and they truly sustain that character. Do you call yourselves Christians? Does then the religion of him whom you call your savior inspire your spirits and guide your practices? Surely not. It is recorded of him that a bruised reed he never broke. Cease then to call yourselves Christians, lest you declare to the world your hypocrisy. Cease too to call other nations savage, when you are tenfold more the children of cruelty than they. That's really amazing. Honestly, that was really spoken well. Um, this was spoken by Mohawk, who you can clearly see is questioning the teachings of the Christian faith. That he's having a hard time understanding how they're able to teach this belief to others when it doesn't seem like they're abiding by it themselves. They are aligned and guided only for money, but their religion says to be guided by God. Their motto seems to be money, money, get rich, get money, and be a gentleman. It's crazy thinking of this being said at such a time as 1657 and how tenfold true it is now. There is no respect for native resources. White men have perfected capitalism in the United States. To do this, they must have no empathy or respect for native resources, with the only goal in mind to enrich their individual selves. Products are made for profit, not for the good of all. Food is created to get people craving more so that they buy more and enrich you, not for the nourishment of children. When you do not get more and more profits, you lay off and fire people with families to provide for. The goal is always I, individual, want more money for myself selfishly. You never take into account others. They know the future effects of this, the deforestation, the negative climate changes, and the negative effect to native wildlife. They're aware of these effects, and sometimes these large companies are sued for it, but it all comes down to that they don't care. They don't respect resources that were never theirs. I am poor and naked, but I am the chief of the nation. We do not want riches, but we do want to train our children right. We do not want riches, we want peace and love. Again, this shows the different human system that Native Americans ran on, caring for their children and tending to their land with care. I wish to be a brave man as much as a white boy desires to be a great lawyer or even president of the United States. I think this is my favorite quote because it's just so true. Why does every white guy want to be a lawyer and like control? I'm sorry, that's my own individual curiosity, but it's so true. Why does every white man want to rule everyone else or be a cop? Can we like look into that, please? Please. Okay. And some of this is because representation. With 40 US presidents to look at as inspiration and thousands of well known lawyers, white people know it's possible for them to be hired into high leadership roles. And then they could lobby as a wealthy man or be a politician to write laws to control others. The laws that govern Native Americans were obviously vastly different from the lack of moral compass and the laws that govern whites at this time. Native American law included respect of the land. No tribe has the right to sell, even to each other, much less to strangers. Sell a country? Why not sell the air, the great sea, as well as the earth? Didn't the Great Spirit make them all for all of his children? This is the perfect example of how far profit weighed over human lives. Through capitalism, we can see that this then exaggerated statement is now a reality. There is literally a company selling air. I think it's supposed to be some specialty air for mountain climbers, but the fact is still present. There's a company selling air. And unfortunately, I've actually seen this in Dick's Sporting Goods, and I actually like saw the canisters there. It was just really sad to see. I don't even have words to like describe that. I actually saw like a clip of them on Shark Tank, and I don't think anyone invested in them at the time. Something so absurd that everyone has a right to is up for profit. The problem with capitaling off and charging profit for food, shelter, and water is that it excludes those who are poor. Why do you work for natural resources? Something everyone inherently deserves. This should not be a controversial statement. They try to persuade us to convert our polls. and of wood that are as tall and lofty as these trees. Very well. But why do men of 5 and 6 feet in height need houses that are 60 to 80? Greed. Going back to South Africa, through Trevor Noah's experience, he talks about his mother. His mother ran away at 22 to live in downtown Johannesburg. There was one problem: it was illegal for black people to live there. How infuriating is it to read this? To think of the actual world where white lawmakers and rule-makers control the fate of African people in an African country. They migrate to another people's home, persecute them, create their own laws, and control Africans in Africa. They are not native to Africa. They control what jobs African women and men are allowed to have, reserving white collar jobs for non native white people, and Africans to work in factories as physical laborers. We have to remind ourselves that the majority of white people are native to Europe. They are immigrants in most places. But why is the target of immigrants people of color? Why are the people up for criminalization and separation of families not white? Because these white people are typically the ones that are writing the laws. They're creating the words for who is up for prosecution. If we have never broken down the criminal system that was founded on racism, why would we expect it to be any different now? Court systems are inherently racist and unjust to people of color because they were created with the intention of being racist and unjust to people of color. I want to give thanks to all the people in the past that have fought to make these systems more transparent, fair, and equal to those of color. And we need to get better. The end. The end. Sorry. That is all. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really hope you enjoyed. Please do leave any comments or discussion down in the comments if you have anything. Um, and I promise I'll be responding to every single one. So thank. If you felt really connected to this topic, please let me know. And thank you again for watching. Bye. And then they could lobby as a wealthy man or become a politician. I don't know if he's gonna sit down. He's just gonna keep. 1, 2, 1. Okay, I think the mic's working. Okay. Caring for their children and caring for their land with care.